Hey everybody, it's me, it's James, coming to you on a very pleasant Sabbath morning. Um, what is today? Today is the 22nd of August. Um, Sorry, my mustache is kind of curling up a little bit. That happens sometimes, comes with the territory. Hope everybody's having an awesome Sabbath this morning. I'm excited. The weather's beautiful. We're planning on having some fellowship later today, outdoors. So that's going to be really nice with our friends and family in the faith. Okay, so I wanted to come and squeeze this in real quick. I've been meaning to get this out forever. And I touched on this on the YouTube channel like maybe over a year ago. I did an audio recording called How Long is the Tribulation or something like that. And I'm going to kind of go more in depth this time um, on certain aspects of that because I think that understanding how long the tribulation will be, good morning, is key to how this end times deception is going to play out. Okay. So if you're tuned in, right before I went on my Facebook page, I posted a timeline, a couple timelines. It's a JPEG file. It came out a little bit smaller than I thought it would be. So I'm obviously not tech savvy on that kind of stuff. It's readable, I think, but it's not. It's kind of right on the cusp. So if you can't read it, if it's too small, private message me or ask me in the comments, whatever. And when I get done with this stream, I'll send you an actual file that you can see bigger print. Because I thought that a visual timeline would be helpful to kind of visualize what I'm trying to say here because we're dealing with timelines. Okay, so the conventional wisdom on how long the tribulation is it's based on Daniel's 70 weeks. All right, in Daniel chapter 9, that 70th week. And I did a whole thing on Daniel chapter 9. It's on my Facebook. You can find it. But like the idea is that we've already done 69 weeks, and then now we're waiting on the 70th week, which is 7 years, and then that's the tribulation, and then you have this peace treaty with Israel that's 7 years, 3.5 years into it, the Antichrist um, uh, breaks the treaty, desecrates the temple, all this stuff, and that starts the tribulation. And then at the end of that, the end of the 7 years, Jesus comes. And of course, depending on your views on rapture or not, the rapture might happen before, during, or after, however that works. So that's the prevailing view, okay? And if you're looking at that chart, the first chart is basically that view, okay? That's the prevailing view. And there's different variations on that. I just kind of have the standard general timeline of what most dispensationalist Bible teachers will say is going to happen at the end. Okay, um, so I'm going to advocate for a 10-year tribulation period, not a 7 year. Okay, and you're thinking like, oh no, not an extra 3 years. Great, yeah, an extra 3 years. I'm pretty sure that this is how it's going to play out. Okay, and here's why. Um, just to keep this short, I'm probably not going to read a lot. I'm going to be dealing mostly with Revelation 11 through 13, those three chapters there. Okay, this is where we get the timelines from. Your 42 months it talks about, your 1260 days, and your times and half a times. Of course, Daniel also has his own date counts. I'm not going to be dealing with those in this study. I'm going to only be dealing with the stuff in Revelation because that's kind of presented as one block of information. Okay, so my first question is, the typical wisdom is that the 1260 days, the 42 months, and the times and half a times are all the same period of time. Okay? In other words, if you take 1260 and you divide that by 42 months, you get 30. Okay? A month is approximately 30 days. The problem is that in order to do that, your year has to be 360 days long. Okay, nowhere in the Bible does it ever say a year is 360 days long. Never. And people will use the account of the flood, the chronology of the flood, to imply, oh, well, there's a 360-day year implied with the flood, and they'll call it a prophetic year. But there's nothing in the Bible that just point blank says a year is 360 days. A month is 30 days. It's not there. You're not going to find it. Okay? So the other thing is, is if you take that year of 360 days that we just mentioned and you multiply it by 3.5, a time times and half a time, you get 1260 days. So mathematically, if you use a 360-day year, these time frames are all equivalent. And so people have figured that out and they've latched onto it. And the prevailing wisdom is that this is all, anytime you see 42 months, 1260, or time times and half times, it's all the same period of time because the math works out to where they all match. Okay? My thought process on this, if it was really going to be 1260 days, why not just say 1260 days? Why give the time frame to us three different ways? Yahweh's not the author of confusion. Okay? It's my position that he gave it to us three different ways to show us that it's three different time frames. So in other words, instead of having one block of time that's 1260 days, that's also 42 months, that's also 3.5 years, we have 42 months plus 1260 days plus a time times and half a time. Okay? Does that make sense? If you're looking at the charts, you'll see this. Okay, you'll see that the top view is the 7-year, the bottom is the 10-year. The 10-year, it's broken out into three distinct parts. Okay, now with the 7-year, typically you will have for the first 3.5 years that they'll call that the 42 months. Okay, in Revelation 11, where it talks about the Gentiles being treading over the city for 42 months. Okay, they'll say that that's after the Antichrist has made his treaty. They're in control of Jerusalem. They built the temple for those first 42 months. That's what this is, and they'll call it different people. I say they. It's like I said. There's tons of different interpretation on this, but generally they will say that first 42 months is the birth pangs. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. Different things like this. Okay, they'll call it the tribulation, but not the Great Tribulation. Okay, so they'll put that 42 months in Revelation 11 on the front end of that 7 years. Okay, then in the middle of that, 3.5 years in, that's when the Antichrist does his thing, and then now you've got your second 3.5 years, which is also your 1260 days, which is also your 42 months. Okay, so that's how they break out that 7-year time frame using these time frames in Revelation. Okay, and you can see that on the first timeline. Okay, so my view is that, like I said earlier, they're separate. We don't look at them all together. We look at them separate. Okay, the only reason I can think of, just thinking logically, because that's what I like to do, that Yahweh would put different ways is to show us how they line up. So if you're looking at that chart, what I've done is I've taken the first thing we see, the first time frame that we see is the 42 months in Revelation 11. Okay, like I just mentioned. So I'm operating under the assumption that that's the first block of time. So I put it first on the chart. Okay. Now the next block of time that we see mentioned further down in Revelation is the 1260 days. This is the time of the two witnesses. So I put that second. Okay. Then when we get to Revelation 13, we see the time times and half a time. I'm sorry, Revelation 12, we see the time times and half a times. So I put that third. Okay. And what I've also done is I've made the assumption that when any events that happen, like say the 1260-day stuff, okay, 1260 days, that is the two witnesses, and it's the woman fleeing to the wilderness, okay, in Revelation 12, starting in verse 6, okay, the woman flees to the wilderness for 1260 days, okay, so I'm putting the events that say 1260 days as happening at the same time. When I see 42 months, I'm putting those events at the same time. And this is different than how most people do it. Because the 42 months, is the Gentiles trampling over the holy city in Revelation 11. And it's also the dominion of the beast in Revelation 13. Okay, well, you've got a big chapter gap in the middle there, right? But I'm syncing those 42 months up together because I'm under the assumption that Yahweh is putting those 42 months on those two events for a reason. And so I'm lining them up under the assumption that they go together. Because yes, the book of Revelation is unsealed, but he also wants us to use our understanding and use our brains when we read it. And logically, I don't see any other reason to state these time frames differently unless he's trying to clue us in on how the chronology will actually work. Does that make sense? So, to keep this short, the way I'm looking at it, the first 42 months is the beast is in power. Like we see in Revelation 13, it says he has dominion for 42 months, or authority will be given to him for 42 months, okay? In Revelation 11, we see that the Gentiles have overrun the holy city, Jerusalem, and they're trampling it underfoot. I'm putting those two together chronologically. Okay, so I'm saying that while the beast has authority, that's before the two witnesses come on the scene. Okay, and which makes sense because we see that the beast that comes up out of the bottomless pit is the one that makes war against them. Okay, so it doesn't make sense to have the beast come on the scene after the two witnesses. It makes sense to have that happen before. Okay, so that works if the 42 months are lined up. Okay, so the beast is on the scene before the two witnesses come on the scene. And if you're looking at the bottom timeline on that chart, the 10-year, you'll see that the first 42 months is Jerusalem is being trampled, but you've also got the beast in power. Okay? The next thing that happens is your 1260 days. Well, that's your two witnesses prophesying against the beast in Jerusalem. Okay? And then that's also when the woman is caught up, or not caught up, she's taken to the wilderness. She flees to the wilderness to be nourished for 1260 days because the dragon was after the woman, right? We read that in Revelation 12. Those events I'm putting together at the same time. So while the two witnesses are prophesying against the beast in Jerusalem, the woman is in the wilderness being protected from the dragon. Okay? That's how I'm processing that because of the 1260s. I'm lining them up. I'm making the events happen at the same time. All right? Now, when you read Revelation 12, this is where the whole thing where the time frames are the same. You know, the 1260, the 42 months, the times and half a times, it's all the same period. It breaks down if we read Revelation 12 logically, okay? Because up at the beginning, starting in verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male, who is to rule over all the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to Yahweh and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by Yahweh, so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. Okay, I'm just going to keep reading. Okay, there was war in heaven. This is not some primordial war where Lucifer fell out of heaven and all this kind of stuff like we're taught. This is future. This hasn't happened yet. Read the book of Job. Satan is still coming before the throne of Yahweh in the book of Job. Okay, so this is future tense. He has not been kicked out of heaven yet. All right. So there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to earth. I want you to sock this away in your mind because we're going to get to this later. Process what is being said here and how it's being said. Okay? The great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying, Now the salvation, the power, the kingdom of our Elohim, our God, and the authority of his Messiah have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. He accuses them before our God day and night. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb, and because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their life, even when faced with death. For this reason rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. Now, if we read this logically, we can place this war in heaven and Satan being kicked out of heaven after the 1260 days. Okay? Now, that's how it reads. You know, she's nourished for 1260 days and there was war in heaven. Okay? Now, granted, it doesn't say, and then there was war in heaven, which would definitely place it after. But the text is open enough to where we can do that and it still makes sense. Okay? If you're following me with that. Now, let's keep reading. When the dragon saw that he was thrown down to earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. So this takes us back up to the beginning of the chapter. He was trying to go after the male child who she was giving birth to. The child was caught up to Yahweh's throne. So he went after the woman, but the woman fled to the wilderness for 1260 days. Okay, so now the dragon is going back after the woman. Okay? The dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. He's persecuting the woman. Okay? Up earlier, the woman fled. He didn't touch her. She got away. How do you persecute someone unless you actually have access to them to persecute them? We're dealing with two different events here. So he's persecuting the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she would fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. Okay? So the timeline here when we read Revelation 12 is the woman is giving birth to this male child. The dragon wants to stop it. He's not able to. The child is caught up to heaven. The woman flees. Flees. That's she's the one doing it, fleeing to the wilderness for 1260 days. Satan is kicked out of heaven. He falls to earth. He's a little ticked off. So he persecutes the woman. He persecutes the woman. He wasn't able to before, but now he's going to persecute the woman. Now she's taken to the wilderness for a time, times, and half a times. Okay? So we're dealing with, if we're honest with how this text reads, we're dealing with 1260 days, Satan falls, then time, times, and half a times. They're not congruent. They're not together. Okay? They're just not. The text makes no sense. If you say that time, times, and half a times is the 1260 days, then the text breaks down. It makes no sense if we think about it logically. Okay? So that's how that reads. So that's why I have that on my chart, on my 10-year chart. I have that time, times, and half a times after the 1260 days. Because that's how it reads in the text. And that's the only way it really makes sense. So in my 10-year chronology, you have your 42 months first, you have your 1260 days second, and then you have your time, times, and half a times third. Now, there's a couple variables here. How long is a month? Okay. Now, if we're talking lunar months, like biblical chronology, that's an average of 29 and a half days, 29.5. Okay, so if you say 42 months of that, I think it's 1,239 days or something like that offhand, if I recall. Are we talking months that are currently like on our Gregorian calendars, because that's the time frame that the world functions in? Are we talking those kind of months? I don't know, but it's roughly a month, right? Okay, so the time, times, and half a times. Now there is a word for year in the Greek and the Hebrew. There's a word for year. So in Daniel, where it talks about the time, times, and half times, it does not use the word for year. And in the Greek, in Revelation, when it talks about the time, times, and half times, it does not use the word year. So if Yahweh was trying to get it to our heads that these are 3.5 years, why not just say 3.5 years? But he doesn't. He says 3.5 times. How long is that time? I don't know. That's the biggest variable in this to me. I don't know how long that time is. Okay? Are we talking like a solar year? Because, that's different from the lunar year that the biblical calendar is reckoned off of. Are we talking 52 weeks, 364 days, which is roughly a solar year? Not exact, but it's easy to count. And that's the Enoch calendar is based off of that, for whatever that's worth. I don't really know. I don't know what the time is. But operating under the assumption that it's roughly a year, that's where I get, if you say roughly 3.5 years, roughly, okay, plus your 1260, plus your 42 months, that takes you just over 10 years. It's like 10 years and change, okay, depending on how long your time is, depending on what you plug in there. All right, so I'm just rounding it to 10 years. Anyway, so here's why I think this is key. Hopefully you're tracking with me so far. I'm condensing this way down, but I do think it's important to understand that we're dealing with multiple spans of time here, not just one time period that's all condensed. Okay, now let's think about this logically. Okay, on the 7-year chart, the conventional dispensationalist 7-year chart, what happens at the end of the 1260 days? Jesus returns, right? Jesus returns at the end. That's not even factoring in rapture or anything like that, because as I understand rapture, there's a secret rapture, but then he really returns later at the end. Okay, we're looking at the end of this. At the end, he returns. That's when he comes out of heaven, and it says he'll come. He'll come. You'll see him coming from the east, to the west like lightning. Right? Every eye will see him come. Okay, focus in on that word like lightning. Okay, because this is important. When that's at the end of the 1260. Okay, now on the chart that I'm presenting, the 10-year, what happens at the end of the 1260 days? We just read it. That's when Satan is kicked out of heaven. That's when he falls from heaven. Okay? Now I want to read something real quick. Let me see if I can find it offhand. I should have marked it ahead of time. Let's see here. No. Well, we know. Man, I really wanted. I should have marked it first. Didn't mark. Yeah, I'm not finding it easily. I should have marked it. Anyway, so Joshua sends the 70 out. Okay, not the 12. He sends the 70. And this is where he says, don't take any money, just go to the head of the house, when you go into the town, stay as long as, all this kind of stuff, right? When they come back, this is where Joshua says, or Jesus says, I saw Satan like lightning fall from heaven. Okay? Now, people, like they do in Revelation, they'll say, oh, well, he was there when Satan was kicked out of heaven eons ago, and he's talking about that. How does that make any sense in context? Okay? These disciples have just gone out giving sending the gospel out, okay? And they're coming back with the results. They're telling him, hey, this went great. Here's what happened, everything. And then he throws that little statement out there. It has no relevance at all. Like, he's telling them this, oh, I remember so many eons ago. I was just, we had this little incident in heaven with Lucifer, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense in the context. What I think he was doing is he was looking forward, because they were sowing the seed of the gospel then, and he was looking forward to the end when the gospel bore all its fruit. Okay? He was seeing Revelation 12. He was seeing the results of that, because what does it say in Revelation 12? They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Where did they get the word of their testimony? That's the gospel. That's what the 70 were sending out. So Yahshua was looking ahead, and he was prophetically talking about the fall of Satan in Revelation 12. So if Yahshua is saying that Satan falling from heaven is like lightning, and he describes his own coming as the same, like lightning from the east to the west, then if we look at those charts, at the end of that 1260 days, Christians are expecting Jesus to come from heaven at the end of the 1260 days like lightning. But on my chart, Satan falls from heaven at the end of the 1260 days like lightning, as Yahshua said. So is it possible that this could be part of the deception? That people are looking at this timeline and they think, well, the 1260 days, the times and half times, the 42 months is over. Next step is Jesus comes, except they've got the timeline wrong. So who they think is coming is not Jesus, or maybe it is Jesus in a way, but it's not the real Messiah. It's not Yahshua. Because what does it say? Satan and his angels masquerade as angels of light, okay, as ministers of light. So is it possible that this dispensationalist timeline, this 7-year timeline that everybody is looking for to happen, could be the key to how this deception is propagated? I really think so, guys, because here's another angle of it. In Revelation 13, you have the 42 months with the beast, right? And then it talks about the false prophet, the second beast, the one that causes signs and wonders. And then this is where we get the mark of the beast and all this kind of stuff. That's the second beast. That's the false prophet. Okay? I posted earlier a video sermon from Lex Meyer, okay, Grafted Church, and he was talking about this. And he made the point. When you look in your Bible, when you are seeing prophets of other gods, like say when you're dealing with Elijah at Mount Carmel, he doesn't round up 450 false prophets. He rounds up 450 prophets of Baal. So the prophets of other gods are always identified as a prophet of Baal, a prophet of Molech, prophet of, you could say prophet of Allah in modern times, prophet of Buddha, whatever, right? They're prophet of whatever God that they're speaking for. When Yahweh is calling someone a false prophet, that's a prophet who is presuming to speak for him, but they're doing it falsely. We see this in Jeremiah. We see this with the prophet Hananiah, who Jeremiah called out. Okay? That's a false prophet. So a false prophet is someone who is pretending to be a real prophet. They might actually believe they are a prophet of Yahweh, but they're leading people away from Yahweh. They're giving them lies, like Hananiah, okay? Like Balaam. Balaam was a prophet of Yahweh. He talked directly to Yahweh, but he led the people away from Yahweh. So Balaam is a false prophet, okay? So the false prophet is going to be someone who, on the surface, is advocating for the truth. He's advocating for Yahweh, okay? And it says he's got two horns like a lamb. He's going to look like a sheep. He's going to look like he's part of the flock, but he speaks as a dragon. What does the dragon say in the garden? Has Elohim said? Let's think about this. It's that subtle little serpent tongue that wedges its way into your soul and just causes, it divides you from the word of Yahweh, divides you from the truth. That's the false prophet, okay? Now, what do we have? That comes, he's presented after the 42 months, presumably, okay? Now, there's not enough in the text to say conclusively that it happens after the 42 months. Maybe he's during the 42 months. But if he's after, on my timeline, the 1260 days comes after the 42 months. Who else is on the scene during that 1260 days? The two witnesses. The two witnesses are doing signs and wonders. Okay? And if we put the two witnesses on the scene at the same time as the false prophet, then all of a sudden, we've got a scenario that looks a lot like Moses in Pharaoh's court going against the court magicians. Okay? Because remember, those first few plagues, those first few signs that Moses was doing, those Egyptian conjurers could do that too. They could turn their staff into a snake. They could turn the water to blood, these kinds of things. So to me, if you put all that together, it solidifies just exactly how so many Christians will be, and even Hebrew roots Messianic folks will be deceived, because you're going to have these things that are copies, that are blatant copies, but they're going to be so close and subtle because we don't understand the timelines. We're not going to understand what we're looking at because we're going to be expecting one thing when another thing is happening. We're going to be expecting Jesus to return right when Lucifer, I say Lucifer, I don't believe his name is Lucifer, but the devil is falling, okay? So I think that that's key, because if you've got people, if Satan falls and his job is to deceive people, and he's going after the woman, he's going after the seed of the woman who what? Keep the testimony of Yahshua, of Jesus, and the commandments of Yahweh. Okay? So he's going after those people. Now, mainstream Christianity advocates against the commandments. Do not keep the commandments, period. So if Satan falls from heaven at the end of that 1260 days, and is going after people who are wanting to keep Yahweh's commandments, that's right in line with Pauline Christianity. So Satan could present himself as the Pauline Jesus, okay, as a Jesus who enforces this lawless, like Paul talked about. He warned us in Second Thessalonians, this is a man of lawlessness, okay? That's Satan coming in some kind of guise and going after people who want to keep the law, okay? Because he's going to promote a lawless religion. He's going to promote Pauline lawless Christianity. And when I say Pauline, Paul didn't advocate for lawlessness. But his writings, the Pauline writings, have been used by Christianity to justify lawlessness. Okay? So, anyway, that's where I'm going with that. We need to understand these time frames. So, if you want to discuss this further with me, please let me know. I've got to go. I've got to wrap this up now. We'll figure out a way to talk about it. And I might come in and do another teaching more in depth at some point. But I really think that this is something to look into. I really, really do. And I made this post public. So if you think that I'm onto something, please share it. Okay? Because this is vital information. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. It'll just fall to the ground. Okay? But if I'm right about this, this is crucial. This is key, and people need to know this. So if you think I'm onto something, or even if you don't, please feel free to share this. I don't ask that often, but I think this is one that needs to get out there, that people need to understand. So again, if you have questions, if you want to dialogue with me about it, that's fine. Let me know. I'll be glad to discuss it with you. Study it one-on-one if we can work it out. I'm going to get ready to go to fellowship at some point this afternoon, so I'm going to cut this off now. I hope everyone has an awesome Sabbath, and Yahweh bless.